All right. Welcome everybody to Metaphysical Bible Study, aka No BS Bible Study, because we keep it real and we tell the truth here and we seek the truth. And so happy to have you here this Sunday. Let me open up the chat lines. Welcome to everybody who's joining us on Zoom at jointruthseekers.com, and everybody who's joining us on social media. Happy to have you here. We are focused on Genesis 31 today, and been going through a process of decoding Genesis at a metaphysical level, not a literal level, at a metaphysical level. And we found some very profound understandings as we've gone through this process. Last week, we decoded Genesis 30, and that was very revealing as we started to look at Jacob's rods and notice that the rods are not to be taken literal. He didn't peel some sticks and all of a sudden these cattle started to breed in a certain way, but those sticks or Jacob's rods were actually allegories to describe our chromosomes, right? Our chromosomes are rods that have bands around them that determine which genes express and which genes are dominant and recessive. And so we decoded that allegory. And of course, the word Genesis has the word genes in it, right? And so we know that this book is metaphorical, allegorical, but many people have taken it literally. There may be some literal text in this book, especially when we get into the letters and things of that nature. But Genesis, Exodus, of course, we know that Jesus talked in parables, similes, metaphors, right? So if you can't break those down and decode those, then you're actually only getting the surface level truth. And we know that the truth will set you free. And that's what we do here at Metaphysical Bible Study. We seek the truth and nothing but the truth. And so to start us off today, before we get into Genesis 30, we do two things. There's no dogma here. There's no religiosity here. The Bible is not a Christian text. It's not a religious text. Okay. Christians use the Bible heavily, but it is not a Christian book, right? It existed before Christianity even came into being. And so but it has stood the test of time. And because it has stood the test of time, we have to ask ourselves why. What is it about this book and what's inside of it that has allowed it to stand the test of time and become the most powerful book in the world? And so we are seeking out that power in the book so that we can use it to accelerate and advance our lives. And so thank you for being here. If you're joining us for the first time, happy to have you. You can join us at jointruthseekers.com. That's jointruthseekers.com. That will give you access to the Zoom room as well as to our Facebook group where we continue the dialogue throughout the week. And so for those of you who are veterans and have been here Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, we started in Genesis chapter 1 and now we're in Genesis 31. You know that your homework is always to do the work yourself, to read and decode the chapter 3 times on your own. This is not passive spirituality where you just show up and you sit in the pew and you get the secondhand notes or the cliff notes from the minister who did all the work, who studied to show themselves approved. No, we are engaged in active spirituality where we're actively seeking, where we're actively knocking to get the truth ourselves. We're not going to be passive about our spirituality anymore. We're going to take it seriously and we're going to be intentional about it. And that's how we're going to accelerate our growth, because spirit or the unseen is where our greatest growth comes from. And then it manifests in our physical reality. So thank you for being here. And so with that, we have two simple rituals, and you do not have to engage in them if you choose not to. Again, there's no dog here. All we are doing is seeking the truth. Those rituals include 5 deep breaths. This is to get us in connection with spirit and source. And we know that the breath is the easiest way to connect with God. I don't care what your religion is. The breath is the easiest way to connect with God because something is breathing through you. You cannot stop your breath unless you commit suicide. And so that means that something is breathing through you, and that something is a higher power. And as long as you have breath still in your lungs, then guess what? You still have a purpose here on the earth, and we need to find out what that is. And so we do 5 deep breaths in. We in heaven for 4 seconds. We hold for 1, then we release for 5. And then we're going to go into the Truth Seekers prayer to get us grounded into why we're doing this work and why this work is so important and courageous. And so with that, I'm going to start the meditation. If you have another way of connecting with God, to plugging in so that you can get divine downloads as we read Genesis and read and decode Genesis 31, then please do that. If it's hula hooping for you, if it's cartwheels, if it's jump rope, if it's yoga, whatever it is for you, do it. If it's prayer, go ahead and do it. I'm going to lead folks through just the meditation of breath. Okay. So we're going to do 4 seconds in, hold for 1, and then we release for 5. All right. In heaven, hold, release. in heaven, hold, release. Three more. In heaven, hold, exhale. In heaven, hold, exhale. One more. In heaven, hold, exhale. So if you've ever played with a snow globe, you know that a snow globe, when it's shaken up, it creates all kind of confusion and you can't see the scene that's actually in the snow globe. And so the powerful thing about meditation is that when you put that snow globe down, right, all of those things fall to the bottom and now you can see clearly. And that is the purpose, the true purpose of meditation is to get all of the things that are clouding your thinking right now out of the way so that you can see clearly as we go into this text, all right? And so with that, we want to get into the Truth Seeker's Prayer. I'm going to read that. I'm going to pull that up on my screen for those who are here on Zoom. Let me share my screen. Let's see if AirPlay is working today. Download, otherwise I might have to use Cord. Thank you for being here. Again, if you're joining us on social media, go to jointruthseekers.com. Again, that's jointruthseekers.com. And okay, cool. So I'm going to be reading the Truth Seeker's Prayer right now. This is what it looks like. When you join us on Zoom, you'll be able to see everything that I'm writing in my digital version or PDF version of the Bible, all my notes in the margins and things of that nature. By the time I'm done with this process of decoding the entire Bible, I expect this PDF to be probably one of the most valuable Bibles in the world. And so if you want to be able to access that and see that as we go through the process, then please join us at jointruthseekers.com. Okay, so I'm going to read the Truth Seeker's Prayer. We are truth seekers. We seek the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We know that the truth shall set us free. John 8:32. We believe that when we ask, it shall be given to us. When we seek, we shall find. And when we knock, the door shall be opened unto us. Matthew 7:7. We know that as we sit in the temple of our minds, listening for your voice and asking questions, in that holy place, we shall find understanding and answers. Luke 2:46-47. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Luke 12:2. We know that because the Bible is heavily coded in allegories, Galatians 4:24, similes, Luke 13:18, and parables, Matthew 13:34, many who think they are seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand, including those who call themselves your disciples, Matthew 13:13. We know to not rely on the letter, but the spirit of the word, for the letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. 2 Corinthians 3:6. We are meant to study to show thyself approved unto God, rightly dividing the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15. Wash our feet, which represents our understanding, so that we may build our church, which is here, or temple, which is our own individual belief system, upon a rock of truth, that we are the sons and daughters of God the Most High. Matthew 16:16. May we feel free to renew our minds, Romans 12:2, by destroying and rebuilding our temple over and over and get better and better, leaving no stone standing, Matthew 24:2. We know that when we pray, we shall enter into the closet of our minds, shut the door, and pray to God, which is in secret, Matthew 6:6. And we also know that where two or three are gathered together in your name, I am is in the midst of them, Matthew 18:20. We pray this metaphysical Bible study blesses, builds, and brings all children of God closer to you, whether inside or outside of a religious context, even if that means wrestling with our concept of you for our blessing, like Jacob in Genesis 32. We love you and thank you with all of our hearts, minds, and souls. Matthew 22:37. Ashe, amen, and so it is. So that is a Truth Seeker's Prayer. The reason I put the scriptures there because so that anybody who disagrees or wants to challenge, which we're open to, the approach that I'm taking to the Bible, they can go look at those scriptures themselves and verify that this is actually the work that we're called to do, and that this particular text is not meant to be taken literally. Here's an example of how the Bible gets taken literally. If you go to a Catholic church, you will find a prayer closet. The scripture, when it says go pray in thy closet, does not mean go pray in an actual physical closet. It means go into the closet of your mind, right? But when you take scripture literally, you'll find not only do religious institutions create rituals or practices that actually solidify the literal meaning of the text or the literal interpretation of the text. But this text is far more than that, and this is what we are able to reveal and uncover and as we decode these particular chapters throughout the book. So with that, we are going to go into our pre-work, and our pre-work includes identifying what we think this story is truly about by naming it and titling it, the persons, places, and things, right? The reason we need to do those because especially the names of people and places, they all have Hebrew or Aramaic meanings, and we need to know those meanings in order to actually get to the truth of the story. Then the things, right? The people, the nouns that are in the story, they typically have some significance, whether it is a well, whether it is a sheep, right? Whether it is a watchtower, they typically have some significance, and we need to try to decode those things. And then we take that decoding, a well equals this, and we run that throughout the entire text, and we see if that translation or that key actually works throughout the various stories that are in the text, right? And then, of course, we have questions. We have questions and things that don't make sense. When you come across a biblical story that does not make sense, what will happen for you is that should be the first sign that it is not meant to be taken literally. When you come across a biblical story that does not make sense on the literal level, that means that we have to go deeper to get to the true meaning, all right? And so with that, we're going to do that for Genesis 31 right now. And so for those of you who decoded, how many of you did your homework and decoded Genesis 31 by reading it 3 times yourself and doing your best to decode in advance of this study, okay? You're not coming here to learn from me, right? We're coming here collectively to learn from each other. This is not passive spirituality. This is active spirituality. And your homework is to always read and decode the text for yourself in advance. You're not coming here to get my cliff notes. You allow me to go study Monday through Saturday, and then you just come get my cliff notes. That is not how you will accelerate your own spiritual growth and development, all right? So with that, if you had to name or title this story, what would you title it? If you had to name or title this story, what would you title it? If you had to name or title this story. Andrea said accident. I don't know that word. I need to find the definition. Anwar says mitochondrial. DNA. All right. Broken promises. Broken promises. Jacob continues to wrestle. Okay. What else? To my father's house. Good. To my father's house. All right. Spiritual upgrade. Beautiful. Spiritual upgrade. So the lens or the name that you give the story will actually shape or frame the lenses through which you find truth. And each one of us is going to have a different understanding based on the divine downloads and our unique connection to God, okay? Some of you might have an engineering background, and all of a sudden you actually see things that I can't see because I don't have the engineering lens. Some of you may have a biological background. Some of you may have a monetary or financial background. And some of you may have a motherly background, and that allows you to see things in the story that I can't see. This is why it's so powerful that each of us has to go through this process on our own, and that no individual can actually give you the truth. That is what's really powerful about this text. This is what it means by it is the living word. There's no singular, right, definition or understanding. That understanding will be revealed based on the depth of our own spiritual growth and the lens through which we look at the stories, okay? So who are the main characters in the story? Who are the persons? Who are the persons? Who are the persons in the story? So we have Kindred, and brethren. Okay. We have Jacob, of course, main character, Laban, Laban, Rachel, right? Leah. Okay. Those are the main characters. Then what are the places that come up? We know Padan Aram comes up again. We know Bethel comes up again. I think it's Mizpah, Syria. Okay. Good. What is it? Gilead, I think. Thank you. Gilead comes up. Okay. Jagar, Sadutha. Okay. Anything else? Canaan. Good. All right. And we've already decoded some of those and translated them from the actual name to their Hebrew meaning. And that gives us clear insights. Now, what are some of the things that come up in the story? What are some of the things that come up in the story? Okay, we see sheep. We see images, stones, river, stone heaps. Okay, camels, tents. All right, good. Now, what questions did you have? Yes, myrrh. I think that's how you spell it. What questions did you have in the story? What questions? Like, this does not make sense. What questions did you have? What things just like, I don't know about that. That doesn't sound right. Okay. Why did Rachel steal the images? Okay. What were the images? What were the images? Okay. What else? What other stories came up? What other questions came up for you? What other questions came up for you or things that did not make sense? How did Jacob and Laban or Laban come to an agreement so fast? Why did Rachel and Leah feel they had nothing, though Jacob had everything? Okay. Why did Jacob take 20 years to stand up for himself? So good. Why did it take 3 days? Take 3 days for Laban to recognize Jacob was gone. Okay. Good. Yeah, what is this point? What is this point that they agreed not to pass? Not to pass. Great questions, y'all. Okay. Beautiful. All right. So let's get into it. So where's verse 1? I think verse 1 is way back here. Where's verse 1? Verse 1 is here. 31. Here we go. Verse 1. Okay. So we are now about to decode Genesis chapter 31. I'm in the King James Version, and I'm going to be reading. We're going to go line by line and decode along the way. Okay. So Genesis 31, verse 1. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our fathers, and of that which was our fathers, hath he gotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not towards him as before. Verse 3. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to field unto his flock. Verse 5. And said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not towards me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. Now, why did I underline the God of my father hath been with me? Why did I underline that? Why do you think I underlined that? We're going to start to be able to start piecing things together, okay? Why would I underline that? Because how was Laban related to Jacob? How was Laban related to Jacob? Through his mother, right? So Jacob is basically Laban's nephew, right? So Jacob is referring to the God of his father, but they come from the same family tree. They come from the same family tree. So this is the depth that I go into, right? So we look at the family tree and we see Terah, right, is at the top. Terah gave birth to Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Nahor and Milcah gave birth to these children here, one of them being Bethuel, which means house of God, right? And out of Bethuel came Rebekah and Laban. So Laban and Rebekah, Jacob's mother, right, are brother and sister. So Laban is Laban is Jacob's uncle, or Jacob is Laban's nephew. So then if we go up the family tree, do they have the same father? Not just one level, but if we go back in the family tree, do they come from one father? They come from one father. They come from Terah. And if we look further at the lineages, right? If we look further at the lineages down here, you see Terah, then Nahor, then Shrug, then you can trace this all the way back to Adam. These are the generations, okay? So that's why I underline that, because Jacob is speaking as if they are of separate bloodline. But the reality is that they come from one, okay? We all come from one source, okay? So verse 6, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. And if, verse 8, if he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Okay. So whatever Laban was saying, right, even though Laban was trying to deceive Jacob, it ended up manifesting in Jacob's favor. So there is scripture that said that God can give wealth and taketh away wealth, right? And so this is an example of that. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me, right? So Laban on the family tree is a generation above Jacob, right? But Jacob is all of a sudden surpassing Laban in terms of being able to have everything that was or belonged to Laban. And when we think about family trees, do you want descendants or ascendants? Yes, Jacob the supplanter has done it again. Jacob the supplanter has done it again. First, he did it to Rebekah's son or his brother Esau, and now he's doing it to Rebekah's brother Laban. So Jacob has supplanted 2 times. Jacob has supplanted 2 times. Okay? Do you see this? So we don't want descendants. To descend means to go up or down. To descend means to go up or down. To descend means to go down. So we don't want descendants. We actually want ascendants. And Jacob, though he is the younger, is now ascending. And every parent that is here should know that at some point, They want their children to surpass them. But the reason that we've been faced with generational curses is that each generation, in some cases, in some bloodlines, gets worse and worse and worse. The programming from one generation gets passed down to the next generation, and nobody actually supplants. You are all here because you are all supplanters. You all get to bypass the programming or overcome or supplant the programming that was put into you by the previous generations. And by generations, I don't mean your parents. I do not mean your parents. I do not want you to look at your parents as the target. This is generational thinking. For our parents' generation as a whole, the paradigm was 40 hours a week for 40 years, right? That was the paradigm for our parents' generation. Now, if you run with that play and you try to execute that in today's day and age, you likely will not succeed. So you have to supplant the old programming that was given to you by those who are perceived as older than you or above you on the family tree. Okay? And so we see Jacob doing this over and over and over again. And it's a skill set that we have to develop. But Jacob has been framed as stealing Esau's birthright. But we know when we decoded that story that this was not about stealing Esau's birthright. That story was really about us tapping into the five senses, right? Which in that story were taste, smell, touch, right? And hearing. Isaac was blind, so there was no seeing, because the most limiting factor that we have in this material realm, in this earthly realm, we think our eyes give us sight, but they are actually the most limiting factor that we have. So Jacob was able to tap in to the other four senses that he had and use his third eye. This is why in Genesis 32, where he will wrestle God at what? Peniel. In chapter 32, Jacob will wrestle God at Peniel, which is the third eye, right? And so using the third eye and the other senses, he was able to get his birthright in advance, right? So from here, and when you move in that way, when you are able to get your birthright without going through the traditional mechanisms, you will have to flee in many cases. When you are able to use spiritual law to get your birthright in a faster way than what other people are doing in the earthly realm, you may have to flee like Jacob fled. Okay? You may have to flee like Jacob fled, because people will not understand. How did you get here so fast? You didn't work as hard as me. What makes you so special? You think you're chosen? This is some of the things that you may have to face on your journey as you tap into spiritual law, which is unlimited, while other people rely on physical law. They choose to trade time for money. They choose to try to build wealth, for example, using their body and time. The body and time are both limited. Why would I want to build my wealth, an unlimited pool of wealth, or how can I even build an unlimited pool of wealth using two limited resources, which is the body and time? So if I actually want to build and create real wealth, I have to transcend the physical laws of this particular space and time. My manifestation may not take 10 years. If I'm tapped in and aligned with God, it can happen just like that. My manifestation may not take a long to-do list and me grinding 80 hours a week, right? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Nope, when I'm aligned, my manifestation can happen a lot faster and easier, and you're going to be wondering why. Because I'm in alignment with my creator, okay? So this is what Jacob is experiencing as he navigates his uncle, Laban, who he came to do work for, okay? So this is why we do this work, because we are bypassing, we're going to Padan Aram, which means spiritual ultimate upgrade. We're going to Padan Aram and being able to see this physical reality from a higher plane of existence. And when I'm able to see the game from up here, as opposed to being in the game down here, I'm able to achieve things a lot faster than those who can't see the forest for the trees because they're so in the trenches. All right. So we're learning how to use our mind to manifest. We're learning to use our imagination to manifest and create like God. You know, God didn't lift a finger to create this world. Let there be light. God did not lift a finger. Not one. God doesn't have fingers. But what many people have done in religion is they've made God in their own image. So now God is instead of God making man in its image, man has made God in its image. And now God is some big human being in the sky. I really believe the true meaning of that scripture is let us make man in our imagination, in our imagination. Where does all creation come from in the earthly realm, y'all? Where does all creation come from in the earthly realm? Everything that you see in the room around you, where did it start? It started in somebody's imagination, otherwise known as imagination. Okay? So, verse 10. And it came to pass at that time that the cattle conceived, and I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled, and grisled. Okay? So we see over and over that God is speaking to Jacob through what? Through what? Through dreams. Through dreams. Literally, Jacob is saying that this is a dream, y'all. Jacob just told you that this is a dream. Okay? So, verse 11, and the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, here I am. Now, supposedly Moses wrote this hundreds of years later. How did Moses know what Jacob dreamed? And how did Moses hear God or Jacob speak to God? How would Moses capture that, family? If some human being wrote this or recaptured this story later, how would he have heard that? Where would he have got the quotes from? How could he know what Jacob actually dreamed? These are some things that these are some critical questions that you have to explore. Okay? Verse 12, and he said, lift up now thine eyes and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring straight and speckled and grisled, for I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. Right? So, verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, and Bethel means what? Bethel means what? Beth means house, okay? Bethlehem is house of bread. Bethel, house of God. So in many ways, you know, El was a Babylonian god, right? El was a Babylonian god. So we see that also. Where else do we see? What other word do we see El in? Israel. We see it over and over and over again. El Shaddai. We see El over and over and over again. That was a Babylonian god. Okay? But religion will rewrite the meaning of things and say that that means the Almighty God. Okay? So we just have to look at what was transpiring in that time and what actual artifactual evidence do we have of a God named El at that moment in time. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and I return unto the land of thy kindred. Verse 14. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us and hath quite devoured also our money. 16. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. So Rachel and Leah, Laban's daughters, which are now Jacob's wives, for some reason they feel empty. They feel like they've been left with nothing because Jacob has it, but Jacob is their husband. So they are supposed to be covered if we are taking this literally. They are supposed to be covered. Whatever Jacob has is theirs. Okay? But even though Laban had given his daughters to Jacob, Laban, Jacob's uncle, continued to try to deceive him and change wages and things of that nature. Okay. So now they're like, honestly, they like, screw our dad. Whatever God says do, that's what you do. That's literally what they just said. They said, F him. He done sold us off, right? He done sold us off. And now we got his stuff. And now we have no inheritance through him. So we rocking with you 100% now. Let's go. Let's do this. We out. I got to give you the Jerry Springer version of the story. Okay. That's the Jerry Springer, because we know we've read all these chapters. This is a whole Jerry Springer season. It's not just one episode. You know, having babies with maid servants, and the baby, the original wife getting mad that she done told him to lay with the maid servant, but then is mad that he had children with them. Come on, man. This is like a Jerry Springer season. This is probably the inspiration for Jerry Springer, because you know Jerry Springer's all actors, right? You know Jerry Springer's all actors, right? So in this book, you know it's all characters, right? It's all characters, right? There's only about, of all the names in the Bible, 3,000 plus characters, only 5 have any historical evidence. There's only historical evidence of about 5. Like Pilate's name is like written on a rock somewhere, so people are like, oh yeah, that's Pilate. And there's some other historical figures that they weaved in, but you have to be careful with historical fiction. I'll give you an example of historical fiction. Just because Dorothy is from Kansas, does that make the Wizard of Oz real? Just because Dorothy is from Kansas and you know Kansas to be a real place, does that make the entire Wizard of Oz real? No. It's called historical fiction. If we weave in some actual things, then it's going to make the entire story more believable to those reading it. It's very, very tricky, family. It's very tricky. So moving forward, verse 17, and then Jacob rose up. I tell you to watch this all the time. Throughout the scripture, you're going to see rise up, go down, rise up, go down. We're going to see mountains, right? Moses goes up to the mountain. Noah's Ark lands on Mount Ararat. Jesus goes up to the mountain, right? We see Jesus goes up in the boat, this and that. This is a journey of the soul's consciousness. So anytime you see a main character in the scripture, guess who the main character is, family? Anytime there's a main character, in this case, it is Jacob, guess who the main character actually is? It is your soul. Anytime you see a main character, I want you to think of it as your soul. This book is documenting your soul's journey up and down and up and down and up and down until it reaches its highest ascension and is fully resurrected. Anytime you see a main character, accept that it is you. When the Matrix came out, is Neo supposed to be some exemplary character or some exception, and you're just supposed to sit there and watch passively? What is the true intention of the Matrix? It is written so that you realize that you are Neo, that you are the one. You're not number 2, you're not number 3, you're not number 4, you're not just an observer. It is written to show you and reveal to you that you are the one. And when you deprogram, when you leave this physical reality and you go into another dimension, you are able to tap into powers that you do not have when you were solely focused in the earthly realm. That whole series is about you unplugging from the program or the matrix. It's about you. It's not about some character on a screen. It's about you. So when you hear the story of Jacob, when you hear the story of Joseph, when you hear the story of Jesus, when you hear the story of Moses, who is it about? It is about you. You getting free from Egypt, which means the ego or bondage. It is about you resurrecting. It is about you walking on water, which is the subconscious mind, mastering it. It is about you being able to heal not only yourself, but others. It is about you leaving a legacy, which is eternal life. It is about you overcoming adversity despite quote unquote haters. It is all about you. This book is about you, family. This is your autobiography. It's actually everybody's autobiography. That's what makes it so powerful. Santiago and the Alchemist. Who is Santiago and the Alchemist? Santiago is about you. It is about you going on a journey to find your purpose. The gain, the loss, the love. It is all about you coming back to yourself. When you read it with that lens, it will empower you as opposed to disempower you in such a way that you feel that you were a sinner. No, I'm a child of God. I'm not even both. Have I sinned or missed the mark? Yes, but that is not my default way of being. I'm not habitually a sinner. If I play basketball once a year, am I a basketball player? If I play basketball once a year, am I a basketball player? No, I played basketball. Somebody who plays basketball every day, are they a basketball player? When you add on the ER? Yes, they are a basketball player. It's something that they do habitually. So if you sin or quote unquote miss the mark, right? Because that's what it means in archery. If you miss the mark occasionally, does that make you a sinner? No. It means you missed the mark. But that is not your default way of being. Your only identity that will transcend and never change is that you are a child of God. And our responsibility is to never forget that. And so in many cases, religion has done the opposite. In fact, if you read the text yourself from cover to cover, you realize that what is packaged to you as religion is literally the opposite of what this book tells you to do and how to live. Oh, they're children of God. Let's tell them the exact opposite. They're sinners. They're supposed to be examples. Let's tell them the opposite. There's this one exception, this guy named Jesus. They will literally tell you the opposite and package to you and serve it to you as the only way to God. It says, "Seek and ye shall find." Let's tell them not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You have to be very mindful. So I encourage everybody here to read the text from cover to cover yourself. Before you come at me in comments or chat, make sure you read the text. Don't just pull from here and here and this scripture here. Make sure you read the text in full before you come at me. Don't talk about context when you haven't read the entire text. Do not talk about context when you haven't read the entire text. All right. So Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels. Verse 18. Verse 18. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods, which he had gotten, and cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram. Y'all remember what Padan Aram means? Padan Aram, ultimate upgrade. These are generations, and we're trying to get to the ultimate upgrade, spiraling up like DNA, right? You hear it over and over in generation. These are the generations. These are the generations. When a new iPhone comes out, it is the 14th generation iPhone, the 15th generation iPhone. Guess what? Our mind is a computer, and we're going through the process of improving, and we're trying to get to the ultimate upgrade. That is a journey. But the programming is so strong from the body and from the ego that it prevents us from actually getting to the ultimate upgrade. And so that's what we're here to navigate. So he said, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. We know that land of Canaan means land of purple, right? Purple represents royalty. But what color is the crown chakra, everybody? What color is the crown chakra? It is purple. You think that's a coincidence that the crown chakra is purple? And when the Israelites or the Hebrews were in bondage, what was the color of the sea that they went through? When the Israelites were in bondage, what color was the sea that they had to pass through? And what color is the root chakra, family? Can't make this up. What color was the root chakra? The root chakra is red. We are moving from our root chakra, because Adam also means from red earth, right? Red man. Esau also red, right? We're moving from the lowest chakra, which is our physical knowingness of self, to the highest chakra, which is the crown chakra. Right? When they put Joseph in the pit, they put blood on the garment. What color is blood? Blood is red. Everything, the symbols are all there. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Verse 19, okay? And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's, okay? Where else do we have theft when man is away? Or when masculine is away? Where else do we have theft? Where else do we have theft? These are repetitious stories. You hear them over and over and over again, because how do you reprogram the subconscious mind? Through repetition. Where else do we have theft while man is not attending or masculine is not attending, y'all? It's going to blow your mind when you hear it. Anybody got it? The Garden of Eden. This is the Garden of Eden story or narrative being weaved back in. Feminine taking something, right, while unattended, while the man was away. There's repetition. So we have to understand, what does that mean? Now, the Garden of Eden has been demonized, as if Eve had done something bad. Eve actually freed us up to a new level of awareness. If you go back to our study of Genesis, what was that, chapter 3? Genesis chapter 3, I think, or 2. If you go back to that story, Eve actually, the feminine, actually opened us up to have an experience of life that was beyond what man was experiencing, what the masculine could experience by itself. It gets demonized as if Eve set this whole thing in motion. We all struggling because Eve ate an apple. Like, just pause real quick. We all struggling in this life because a woman ate an apple, and then from there, that programming demonizes women all throughout the world. Do you really believe that? Just look in the mirror and ask yourself, do you really believe that we're all going through this thing called life? And for a lot of people suffering, I'm not suffering, but a lot of people are suffering because a woman ate an apple that she wasn't supposed to eat. Y'all really think that this is what it's about? The original sin? You know, the language original sin is not even in the Bible. That's more dogma that the church has put on you to get you to buy into that story and see that story in a particular perspective. Okay? So, moving forward. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban, the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. Verse 21, so he fled with all that he had, and he rose up. Again, you see this language, rose up, and passed over the river, and set his face towards Mount Gilead. Okay, anybody research what Gilead means? Did anybody research what Gilead means? Gilead means perpetual fountain, heap of testimony, to roll, or perpetuity. Okay, so again, here we are on a mountain, meaning mountain means what? Mountain means what? An elevated level of consciousness. That's what a mountain means, an elevated level of consciousness. This is why the 10 Commandments were on a mountain. This is why Jesus goes up the mountain. This is why Noah's Ark lands on a mountain. It's an elevation of consciousness, all right? And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. Where else do we hear third day, y'all? Where else do we hear third day? Jesus rose on the third day. Same story is being told over and over and over again with different characters in different ways. And I've already told you that Jesus's story is literally an amalgamation of all the Old Testament stories into one character. The Old Testament has a ton of main characters, right? The Jesus story, they're like, we need to simplify these for these people so that we can program them faster. So we're going to put it all into one character. We're going to take all these lessons from the Old Testament, we're going to put them all into one character. This is why we've done T-charts of Noah and Jesus, Joseph and Jesus, Adam and Jesus. Jesus is the second Adam, right? No, they took these old archetypal stories and they tried to weave it all into one character. And they tried to make you believe that the story is 100% literal and true by creating 4 different versions of it. Because if I have enough hype men telling you that this is what happened, then guess what? You're going to believe that it's true. You think there are people in the Middle East named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? You really believe that there are people in the Middle East in this time named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? In fact, if you go there today, I don't think you'll find that many Matthew, Marks, Lukes, or Johns even today. But if we write the same stories 4 ways, then people will definitely believe that it's true. Because in fact, we don't have any other evidence that this character existed. So we're just going to write the story 4 times so it looks like there's 4 accounts of that person's existence. The trickery. How come there's no 4 accounts of any other thing in the Bible? How come there's no other 4 accounts of anything there? Why there? And what happened in the book of Thomas? Why did the book of Thomas get left out? Because there's truth in the book of Thomas that will reveal to you things that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John don't share. They wasn't ready. They wasn't ready. All right. And was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob fled, and he took his brethren with him and pursued him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. The number 7, we've been covering this over and over in Genesis. What does 7 actually represent? What does 7 represent? The chakras. Laban, once we decode what Laban actually means, had to go through the 7 chakras to catch up to Jacob. It's labeled here as 7 days, but it's the elevation through the 7 chakras. Laban had to rise up to catch up to Jacob. Okay, so verse 24, and God came to Laban, the Syrian, in a dream by night, again, coming to him by dream, right? And said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. What could this possibly mean? God saying, don't speak good or bad of Jacob. So Laban is supposed to be what? Indifferent. So then the question becomes, there you go, Anwar, tree of good and evil. Then Laban is supposed to be what? What is something that is supposed to be indifferent inside of us. If you get this, then you're going to start to crack the code. What is supposed to be indifferent and not speak good or bad of anything? What is supposed to be the non-judgmental thing that is inside of us? Neutral, yes. I see some people saying subconscious. I believe that is our true ego, our God-led ego. Our God-led ego. There's two egos. When everybody uses the word ego, they think there's actually two different egos. There's the ego that actually mediates between the id and the superego. And then there's the ego that people associate with arrogance. So, in the English language, many words have multiple meanings, but everybody has lumped ego into one thing, but there's actually two egos. There's the ego where there's arrogance, right? That person got a big ego. But then there's an ego that is actually a function inside of us that actually is supposed to mediate between the id and the superego. It is a mechanism that has been placed inside of us by God. But we tend to wrap them all into one thing, not being fully aware that there's two egos that we're actually speaking about. Okay? And I'll show you. Show you right here. Look. According to Sigmund Freud, the ego is part of the personality that mediates the demands of the id and the superego in reality. Freud described the id as the most basic part of personality that urges people to fulfill their most primal needs. Okay, so that's where you get the devil on your shoulder, your most primal needs, what I want right now, the physical, the flesh, right? The superego, on the other hand, is the moralistic part of the personality that forms later in childhood as a result of upbringing and social influences. So the superego is the angel on this side that is being guided by your morals. The ego that God has given us, not the ego of arrogance, the ego that God has given us is literally has scales and is navigating between the id and the superego. It is a function, a healthy function in our minds that is necessary. Okay, according to Freud, psychoanalytic theory, the id is a primitive and instinctual part of the mind and contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. The superego operates as a moral conscience. The ego is the realistic part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego. Did you see that? The ego is the realistic part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego. This is not what the type of ego we're talking about when we say somebody has a big ego. That's the arrogance. We don't want that kind of ego, okay? That's the possessive ego. That's the my ego. The ego that we're talking about in this story that Laban is supposed to actually represent is this one here that I'm showing you from Freud. And Laban is now in a moment where he has to make a decision between what? The id, right? Which is the possessive primal part of him, and the superego, which is the moralistic. What is actually right here? Jacob did right by me, but I'm still angered and I pursued after him hotly, as they say in the Bible. But what is actually right here? God said, before you go to Jacob, I want you to not speak good or bad. I want you to be in a non-judgmental space. The Laban represents the ego, this ego. But Laban is actually being torn between this ego and the ego that is arrogant. The God-led ego, right? And the possessive, flesh-led, primal ego. These are two different egos. Okay? Is everybody clear on that? So when you hear somebody talk about, oh, man, you got to let go of your ego. No, you don't. You need to let go of the arrogant version of ego, okay? But there's an element of ego, a different kind of ego that is inside of you that is essential for you to navigate reality, okay? So, where are we? Speak neither good or bad. Verse 25. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount. Tent. When we see the word tent, what does tent represent? tent is a temporary state of consciousness. A tent represents a temporary state of consciousness. When we see house, that is more of a permanent state of consciousness, okay? So I'll give you an example of how you can use house as a key. When it says a house divided against itself cannot stand, on the literal level, some people say, oh, that means a marriage, a relationship. And it works on the literal, as above, so below, correct? But what a house really means is that a mind divided against itself cannot stand. A mind that says, I want to be rich, but I hate rich people. That is a mind that has cognitive dissonance. That is a house divided against itself. So when you think of house, I want you to think of mind, right? Or a more permanent state of consciousness. And when you think of tent, or you see tent, it is a temporary state of consciousness, okay? I'm passing through here, all right? So, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the Mount of Gilead, all right? Verse 26, and Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Verse 27, wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and did not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, with songs, with tabret, and with harp? Was Laban really going to do that, y'all? This is the deception. Laban lying. Everybody say, Laban lying. Laban lying. He wasn't going to do that. Ego wasn't going to do that. But the ego will say whatever it needs to say in the moment. The possessive, arrogant ego will say whatever it needs to say in the moment. Okay? Laban lying. Verse 28. And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. Verse 29. Verse 29. Okay. Verse 29. And it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your fathers spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. When your arrogant or inflated ego is out of control, what does it do to you? When your arrogant or inflated ego is out of control, what does it do to you? It hurts you. Your ego, the arrogant version, the inflated version, has the potential to hurt you. As Jacob, you are Jacob. It has the potential to hurt you, right? But when it is led by God, when it is doing its true function, which is to mediate between the id and the superego, it is not designed to hurt you. It is there to what? Protect you. When it is led by God, when the ego is led by God, it is there to protect you. Okay? So, verse 30. And now thou wouldest need be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Stolen my gods, right? So we know that Rachel stole images and Laban is calling them gods. So in this case, images equals gods, right? And in the 10 Commandments later on, what is one of the 10 Commandments? Yep, gods or idols. Right? In the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not have graven images, right? No graven images. Graven means that it's been carved out, right? That it was not natural. Graven means physical. And what the inflated ego thrives off of is what? It thrives off of graven images, false gods. Thou shalt put no gods before me. But the inflated ego thrives off of false gods. I have more money than you. I'm prettier than you. I have a higher status than you. My car looks better than yours. I work at this company. My waist is this. I'm of this race. I'm superior to you. I've been to this many places. That is a false God. And many of us, all of us, myself included, have had them. The inflated, immature ego needs false gods as a metric for success. Some of you, I'm more educated than you. I have a higher degree than you. My religion is better than yours, right? Whatever makes you feel better than another human being, that is a false god. Whatever you have that makes you feel better than that you're better than another human being, that is a false god. Because if we go back to the truth, we're all children of God, which makes us then equal. Is that clear? Whatever you have or use, even if you don't say it out loud, but it's in your head, that makes you better than somebody else, it is a false god. It is a graven image. And so my question to you is, what are your false gods? What have you used to measure success in comparison? You can measure success just for yourself. It does not have to be in comparison to anyone else. Your success does not have to be in comparison to anyone else. Because if success is always in comparison, then it means that somebody else has to be a failure for you to feel successful. I don't want to live in a world or a reality that requires that there's failures for me to feel successful. I believe that there's more than enough and that each of us can be successful in our own way by just walking in our God-given purpose. And whether one person's purpose impacts millions of lives and another person's purpose impacts 2 people, it does not matter. What matters is that we were all playing our role and in alignment to the best of our ability with what God called us to do. My success does not require somebody else to fail. Okay? So, verse 31, and Jacob answered and said, Laban, because I was afraid. So we see the reason I highlighted that because Jacob over and over has this thing of fear. Fear. I lied to you about who my wife was because I was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid. And fear, it gets us into trouble. Fear gets us into trouble. For I said, peradventure thou wouldest takest by force thy daughters from me. The verse 32, with whomsoever thou findest thy God, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, right, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. And now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And here go Rachel running her mouth. You know, liars got to tell you the truth at some point in some way. Did y'all know that? Liars always tell you the truth in some way. They have to. They can't keep it in. It's like psychological. They have to. It's almost as if they want to get caught. And so here Rachel is with her big mouth. And she said to her father, let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. If I was Laban, I'd be like, get your AZZ up. Get your AZZ up. Liars always got to tell you or give you a hint. You're the only one talking. Why are you the only one talking over here? Everybody else silent. Watch me go through these bags, but you talking. That's a little suspicious. That's a little suspicious. All right. But Laban moved on. Okay. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Okay. Verse 37, whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, and they may judge betwixt us both. Verse 38, this 20 years have I been with thee. The ewes and the she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flock I have not eaten. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it, and of my hand this thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. What I love about verse 39, this is just an aside, Jacob is taking 100% accountability, no excuses whatsoever. He said, even if your flock was stolen, I replaced it. Anything that happened on my watch, I moved in 100% integrity. This entire 20 years that I've served you, right? And verse 40, thus I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Verse 41, thus have I been 20 years in thy house, 7 plus 7 plus 6, and I served thee 14 years for the 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wage 10 times. Okay? The ego will change the narrative and the story over and over and over again, and it'll forget the stories that it's told. Anything to feel right in the moment and to get by through the moment. Verse 42, except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac hath been with me. Surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God has seen mine affliction and labor of my hands and rebuked thee yesternight. Verse 43, now when the immature ego feels attacked, what does it do? It gets into possessiveness. Watch this. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou see is mine, 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 mine. Because the immature ego is individualistic. It only cares about it. It is individualistic. It forms a personality, which then creates separation between you and all of humanity and spirit. Because now you feel like you're an individual. And honestly, as an individual in this vast universe, you do not feel safe. You feel scared. I have this shirt that has like the whole universe on it, or no, not the whole universe, part of the universe. And then it has an arrow pointing to a dot. It says, and that dot is Earth. And it says, you are here. When you think about how small we are in the context of this entire thing, just think about how an ant feels in the city that you're in. Ant is like, yo, I'm vulnerable out here in these streets. You know what I'm saying? So this is the issue with the individualist ego, the arrogant ego, the ego that actually cuts you off from everything. Okay. Verse 44. And now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. So what happened? What happened so quickly? All of a sudden, Laban is with it. He ready to make a covenant, right? And Jacob took a stone and set it upon for a pillar. Now, stone, when we've seen stone throughout Genesis and when we see it throughout the Bible, what does stone represent? The stone that the builder rejected. The stone was rolled away. Stone means truth, a cornerstone principle, a pillar of our business model, or pillar of our organization, right? These are truths. Stones represent truth. Jacob laid his head on a stone, meaning that he was resting in truth. Okay? And so he took the stone and made a heap, and they did eat thereupon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, right? In Aramaic, that means heap of witness, but Jacob called it Gilead, which is also heap of witness. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore, the name of it is called Gilead. And Mitzvah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. So Mitzvah means watchtower, right? And in the New Testament, you'll see watchtower several times in some of the parables that Jesus speaks of, right? Verse 50. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives besides my daughter, no man is with us. See, God is witness between me and thee. Okay. Verse 51. And so basically, what is it saying? What is it saying? Where is this conversation happening? There's no other man there. There's no other man there. No man is with us. So where is this conversation happening? This conversation is happening in the mind. We already know that God was speaking through dreams, which go through or process through the mind. This conversation is happening in the mind. Because just moments ago, there were brethren collecting the stones for the pillars, correct? According to the story. So now he's saying, no man is with us. The conversation that we have in our mind, there's no man that is in there. No human being that is in there. These are internal conversations between you, your ego, your highest self, your soul. And Laban said unto Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, and that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. For harm. We are not meant to harm each other. Okay? So the ego and the soul are actually making a truce. We're not going to harm each other, right? And verse 53, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, and the God of their father, which is I think Terah, judged betwixt us, and Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Verse 54, and Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. Who else was called to eat bread in celebration? Jesus' disciples. Same story over and over and over again. You know they needed something to wash it down. Didn't say it here, but you know they did. And they tarried all night in the mount. Verse 55, in the early morning, Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. You know what this means, y'all? You said it before. You got to put the ego in its place. You have to put the ego in its place through agreements. That ego serves you. It protects you. But if you stay in a state of protection, right? Fear-based protection, you will never be able to produce. So you have to choose between protect or produce. Jacob is here to produce. Not only did he produce the cattle, but he also reproduced through Leah and Rachel. Jacob is a producer. Laban represents the ego that is there to protect us. When we are in a state of fear, when we are in our individualistic nature, it's the possessive ego, okay? And so you have a universal soul, right? Which is limited by individual personality. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. You have a universe, in other words, you are a universal soul limited by an individual personality. Jacob was limited under Laban. He was limited, and that's why he has to return to his father's house where he is unlimited, okay? So that individual personality is attached to an image, and that image is your self-image. Many of us, the way we define our self-image, it actually limits us. We already discussed some of it. No, have we discussed it yet? I'm not sure if we discussed it yet. No, when we get to Moses, when we get to Exodus. Anything, God calls itself what? I am that I am. But when we, as our individual personalities, say something after I am male. Is that true or false? Am I male? Am I male, y'all? Is that true or false? Is it true or false? Am I male? It's false. I'm masculine and feminine. If I said I was male, I would be not only male, I would be not denying my mother. My mother and father had to come together. Just because I manifested as a man, right? And that's what you see. That's not all that I am. We should have learned that from last chapter with recessive genes, right? But I am Black. Is that true? If I'm talking about my true self, if I'm talking about my soul, is my soul Black? Does my soul have a gender? I'm Democratic. Is that true? Does my soul have a political party? Anytime you add something after I am, you actually limit yourself. Actually, not anything. When you label things or you say I am abundant and abundance is in alignment with God, that is fine. But the things that I just shared with you, male, political party, race, religion, all of these graven images, all these material identities, every time you claim one of them, you are actually limiting yourself. Who sent you? I am that I am. What do you mean? I am that I am. I'm unlimited possibility. As a soul, I could be whatever I desire to be. But if I start putting on labels and adding things after I am, everything I add after I am that has to do with this physical material reality, I limit myself. And that's what the immature ego thrives off of. I'm Black and we're better than this. I'm Christian and we're better than these other people. I'm male and we're better than women. I'm this tall and we're better than short people. I'm in this class and we're better than those people. That's the false ego. That's the immature ego. That's the inflated ego. This is what the image that Rachel stole represents. And this is why Laban hotly pursued after, because that ego, that immature ego, it thrives off of and needs these false gods to feel like it is anything. It feels like it needs these false gods to feel anything. You shall put no other gods before me. The soul, or Jacob, is here to produce, and the ego, Laban, is here to protect. The ego is good for things in the lower chakras. So when we think about where they made this agreement, you will not cross over here, and I will not cross over there. The ego is good for things in the lower chakras. The lower chakras have to do with what? The lower chakras have to do with survival. The lower chakras have to do with the physical plane. That's where graven images, physical things exist. Physical identities exist in the lower planes. Survival, sexual stuff, male, female. Those identities exist here. They made an agreement that I will not pass down here and you will not come up here. Okay? So the ego is good for things in the lower chakras like survival. But beyond that, it needs to mind its own business and let the soul lead the way. So, in summary, there are two egos that we need to be aware of. There is the immature, inflated, possessive, individualistic ego, and then there's the ego that actually is God-led, that is a necessary function that serves as an intermediary between the id, which is our primal urges, and the super ego, which is our moralistic self, right? And what we ultimately want is we want this version of the ego to actually be leading the way. This represented by Jacob, right? This represented by Jacob, and the lower natured ego represented by Laban and his possessiveness of not only the cattle, but also of his daughters and of all the things that Jacob had taken away, right? And so Jacob was uplifted. God gave Jacob Laban's wealth. The wealth was down here and it got transmitted upwards to Padan Aram, the ultimate upgrade. And so this story is an allegory about the battle between our two different types of egos and them coming to an agreement that allows us to actually move forward in our spiritual growth and development. How was that, family? Oh my goodness. This is the journey. This is not a story about an uncle enslaving basically his nephew stealing his cattle and his daughters, and then him coming back after them coming to an agreement. This is not a story about a nephew and an uncle. This is a story about the healthier version of our ego actually leading the way and actually recognizing that the other version of the ego is necessary, but only when it comes to the lower chakras, only when it comes to survival, only when it comes to sexual things and things of that nature. Past this point, we don't need it anymore. I can't let you lead from here. And so I'm going to take all this stuff that you had, and we're going to bring those resources to a higher level of consciousness and use them and operate from here. Right? So I hope, actually, I don't even need to hope. I know that this blessed you. I can see in the comments already that this blessed you. And I'm so blessed to be a blessing. I thank God for using me in this way, for giving me the eyes, the third eye, to actually be able to see the truth and the allegories in these stories. Sometimes, my practice is committed every day. I meditate first, and then I go into the text. I read it probably at least 5 times. And every time I read it, more and more is revealed. And then I'm able to share with you those revelations on these Sundays. So I thank you for going on this journey with me. I don't stand here as an expert. I'm continuing to learn. This is only Genesis, y'all, and we're not even done with Genesis. And there's more. Now, every book in the Bible is not allegorical. So we'll figure out where we're going to go from here. But I'm just so grateful for what we've been able to uncover. And now that we've unlocked some of these keys, like stone, meaning truth, right? Like house, meaning mind, and tent, meaning temporary state of consciousness, right? A mountain, meaning higher consciousness. As we take these truths into some of the parables in the New Testament and other allegorical books or stories throughout the Bible, I know that we're going to find more and more truth, and it'll be revealed to us. So I thank you for having the courage to go on this journey with me. Many people do not have the courage to release their old programming. In fact, when they hear these kind of things, they'll actually go into a deeper trench to defend their programming, as opposed to exploring the truth. Jesus said he only spoke in parables. So it's our responsibility as children of God and as disciples or disciplined people to actually go find out and how to decode those parables and what they actually mean. So that is the work that we're doing here in Metaphysical Bible Study. We also call this No BS Bible Study. That's because there's no BS here. There's no BS here. We are truly seeking the truth, and that's what the purpose of this space is for. So with that, everybody's homework is to read and decode Genesis chapter 32 3 times before you arrive next week. For those of you who are on social media, please join us at jointruthseekers.com. Again, that is jointruthseekers.com. That will give you access to the Zoom room so that you can follow along. In case you couldn't see on social media, here are like my notes in the margin as I read, and you get to see those when you're on Zoom. I share my screen, and it'll also give you access to the Facebook group where you're able to join us and have this conversation throughout the week, not just on Sunday. So I thank everybody that's here. Again, homework is Genesis chapter 32. Read it and decode it 3 times. This is active spirituality, not passive spirituality. I don't want you to just show up here next Sunday and just get my cliff notes after I've studied and showed myself approved. This process is really about you studying to show yourself approved by doing your own work. And I know that's different for most of you. Most preachers want you to rely on them. You have grown beyond just milk, okay? You are beyond milk, and it's time for you to actually chew and get into the meat of the truth. And so I bless you. I wish you a great week, and I look forward to decoding Genesis chapter 32 with you on next Sunday. All right, everybody have a good one. For those of you, yes, thank you, Andrea. For those of you who are in the Zoom room, please go over to the Facebook group and put your divine downloads and takeaways, the things that you learned from Genesis 31, so that we can all learn from each other. And I will see you all next week. All right.